Hello everyone, it's Gary here again, and welcome to the third of our April live trainings. I'm coming to you from Madison, Wisconsin. We had some comments about the clock behind me here showing not noon, as it is here in Wisconsin. That's the time in Berlin, and our office is in Berlin. Right next to that, behind one of these picture frames, is another clock that has the right time on it. So that's why there's that confusion, but I am here in the United States. Today we're going to be talking about compositing in Vegas Pro. Most of what we talk about today will be exclusive to Vegas Pro, although some of it does work in Vegas Movie Studio Platinum, and I can point out when we get to those points. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize about Vegas Pro is just what a powerful compositing tool it really is. And so I wanted to take some time today to show you some of the techniques for compositing in Vegas Pro. I've got a lot to talk about, so I'm going to jump right into it and see if we can get through, see how much I can get through in half an hour here. So before we really talk too much about compositing and show you how it works in Vegas Pro, we have to kind of talk about what compositing is. And let me adjust my video here and get the software up on the screen so you can see what I'm doing. When you have clips on the timeline, I'll just put a couple of clips here on the timeline so we can start our discussion here. If I have two clips and they're on the timeline and one's over the top of the other, all you see is the first one. So in this case, I've put the green truck on top and the white truck on the bottom. In the preview window, all you can see is the green truck. So Vegas composites its pieces of video from the top down. It's almost like if you had a stack of papers on your desk, you put one paper down, you can see it, but if you put another piece of paper on top of it, you can't see the one on the bottom, you can only see the one on the top. And so compositing is all about how you can combine the one on the top with the one on the bottom in order to see a combination of both, or pieces of one and pieces of the other all at the same time. Let me get rid of the one bottom track here and show you an easy example of compositing that you probably have seen a number of different times and not really realized it was compositing. I'm going to take this sample text item and put it on my timeline. I can drop it below the track and make a new track, or you might not know that I can just point to the very top of the existing track and kind of squeeze that in there and drop the text event on top of the existing event. I'm going to hold my control key and lengthen my video clip so that it lasts the same length as the text clip does. And holding the control key creates slow motion. So now, if you look at my video preview window and I play this, you can already see the results of compositing. You've got a piece of text over the top of a piece of video, and that's compositing. In this case, Vegas Pro is using the default composite mode, which is source alpha. What that means is Vegas Pro is going to take the top track and show you what's on the top track, and if that top track happens to have any transparency, as represented by the alpha channel, then it'll show through to the track underneath. And if you look at the event here for the text on the timeline, let me zoom in a little bit. You can see this checkerboard pattern in the background, and anytime you see that checkerboard pattern, that indicates an alpha channel, or in other words, transparency. So even though you probably never really thought of this as compositing, we are doing compositing here with the text over the image. But of course, compositing can get far more sophisticated than that, and this is where Vegas Pro really offers you a lot of choices. And so let's talk a little bit more about those more advanced options of compositing and how they work. So as I said, with the alpha channel, you're combining the top track with the track underneath of it based on alpha channel or transparency in the top track. But that's not the only way that you can combine things. You can, in fact, there's, I didn't count them, but maybe there's a dozen or so different compositing models that you can use. And to understand how those work, you have to understand a little bit about color theory, a little bit about how colors work in Vegas Pro and elsewhere. So colors are represented by, in some cases, in all cases, by various color models. And the color model that we're using in this case is the Rgb Color Model. So every color that you see is made up of a red component, a green component, and a blue component, Rgb. And each one of those components has a value, a color value of between 0, including 0 to 255. So 256 different levels of color. But you can also think of that range from 0 to 255 think of it as 0 to 1. And then, so each of the colors then has a value between 0 and 1. If all three of the colors have the value of 0, then the color is black. If all three of the colors have the value of 1, then the color is white. And then everything in between and combined gives you all the different colors. I'm no colorist or color theory expert, but you need to understand a little bit of those basics before you can really start to grasp what we're doing with compositing. So let's put this little example aside for just a second, and let me bring up a couple of other things here. We'll use the same truck on the bottom track, and in case you don't know this trick, I'm right-clicking and dragging, and when I release, I'm able to choose just the video only. That's why the audio is not coming up when I'm adding this. And then let's turn to our media generators to take a look at a couple of different things. Let's go to the checkerboard in specific, and I'm going to put a checkerboard over the top of the green truck. So now you have a black and white checkerboard. You can't see the truck underneath because, as I explained a second ago or a minute ago, that doesn't have any transparency, no alpha channel. So let's start taking a look at some of the compositing modes that are available. Under the burger menu on the track menu, on the track header, is a list of things, and one of those is the compositing mode. And here are all the different compositing modes. Now, I'm going to be coming to these compositing modes quite a bit during the course of this, so I'm going to go to the visible button set, and I'm going to turn on the compositing modes button so that it now appears on my track header, and I don't have to keep going into the menu to find it each time. So now when I click the composite mode button, you can see that source alpha is the one I've been talking about already. That's the default that gives us transparency, but there are a whole bunch of other ones. I'm going to skip 3D source alpha just for a moment. I'm going to skip custom. Probably we won't get to that in this training. But let's talk about a couple of these other ones. Remember that I said black color. If it's black, all three of the color components have a 0 value, and if it's white, all three of the color components have a value of 1. So let's just talk about black as 0 and white as 1, just for the sake of ease. So these compositing modes dictate how you're going to combine the colors in the top track with the colors in the bottom track. And so let's just go through some of these. I'm not going to go through all of them, but some of them are easy enough to explain that I can grasp it and explain it to you. Some of the others, the math is a little wonky and above my pay grade, so you'll just have to experiment with some of those, but a couple of them are pretty easy. For instance, the add mode. If I add the colors in the top to the colors in the bottom, and we're talking about pixel by pixel, so each pixel in the video has a color value. So if I have white pixels and black pixels, and then I choose add, well, you can do the math. Down in here in the truck video, the pixels have a certain value. I don't know what those values are, but let's say the green one has a certain recipe of those three colors. But the black and white are just ones and zeros. So if I add the ones and zeros up here to the color values down here, then what I should end up with is, in the case of white, a white square plus whatever value down here is going to be 1, which is the value of white, plus whatever the value is down here. Now that's going to be over 1, so it's going to get clamped to 1. Anything over 1 is going to get clamped to 1. The black is 0, so whatever I'm adding to the black from down here is going to be 0 plus the value down here. And 0 plus the value down here is just going to result in the value down here. So if my theory is correct, what we should see when I combine these in add mode is white checks and the black would be replaced by the video on the bottom. Let's see if I got that right. Sure enough, there's your white checks and your black is replaced by what's on the bottom because 1 white plus the color on the bottom is greater than 1, clamps to 1. 0, which is black, plus the color on the bottom equals the color on the bottom, so you see the color on the bottom. And that's a real basic example of a compositing mode other than source alpha. So it's a way to bring in pieces of the bottom video into the top video. Now if we go back to the next mode, which is subtract, then we should get 1 minus the value of this down here, and black minus the value of this down here. So actually it works the other way. You've got the value down here minus the 1 from up here or the black from up here. So you get a different result. Now we see black and the color from the bottom showing through. The next mode, and again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I do want to go through a couple more. The next mode is multiply mask, and this one is a really important one, and I'm going to do something later that shows you why this is important. But this is important for masking out pieces of video. When you multiply, you're multiplying the color in the top times the color in the bottom. So if you're multiplying white times the color in the bottom, you're going to end up with white because it's 1 times the color in the bottom. If you're multiplying the black times the color in the bottom, then you're going to basically get the color in the bottom. So if we choose multiply mask, I think I said that wrong, but you can see what happens. It basically, it drops, no, I said it right, sorry. It multiplies the whites by what's on the bottom, which equals what's on the bottom. So you see in that check what's on the bottom. It multiplies the black, which is 0, times what's on the bottom, which equals 0. So you see a black check in there. Okay, let's move away from this checkerboard and let's maybe work with something a little bit more interesting that shows you how the results of some of this stuff. I'm going to take another media generator. In this case, I'm going to take a noise texture, and I'll take this starry sky here. And it might be a little hard to see, but I'll make the video preview window bigger in a moment. But you can see that the starry sky, the star field is black, and it's got these kind of yellowish stars here. And if we look over at the parameters, you can see that the parameters are yellow. I'm going to change those to white because what we just learned is if it's white and we apply a mask to it, we can start seeing different things where the white is than where the black is. Let's take another piece of generated media. I'll take this linear blend here, and I'll just drop that in there. So now let me pull this off so you can see it a little bit better and make it a little bit bigger for you. So I've got my starry field, and I have my blend mode, remember, set to multiply masks. So it's knocking out my white stars. And if you look closely enough, you can see that it's showing red stars, a band of green stars, and a band of blue stars. So if you're looking to create some sort of special effect that's just not white stars but has some kind of thing going on underneath it, then you can use the multiply blend mode to create a pretty cool effect. Now there's another blend mode that's similar to multiply but has a harder a more drastic effect, and that's hard light. So let me choose hard light. And now you can really see even much better the green stars in the middle, the blue up in the corner, and the red down in the bottom. And of course, if you go in and you say, well, I don't want a linear, I want an elliptical, then you've got a different shape going on here. You've got green and blues and so forth. So there's all kinds of things that you can start doing once you start experimenting with this kind of compositing and so forth. Now, we've got the star field here, and I've got it set to, right now I've got it set to hard light, but let's just go through a couple of these others just to see what some of them look like. So here's what cut looks like. Not sure what the math is behind that, but it kind of takes away everything, and so that one doesn't work for us, but let's keep going. Screen shows us sort of the opposite of what multiply shows us, so it shows us mostly the blend and some of the stars, the star noise. Overlay gives a different look. These are all just different models, and we looked at hard light already, dodge and burn. So there's just different models of compositing that you can use for various effects. Now, of course, so far I'm just using this generated media, but the same holds true if you're using video itself. So let's just say I've got one clip here, and I'll put again just the video portion, and I don't know, another clip right under it, and then we're getting, I'll close my video preview window, sorry about that, let me bring it back open. There it is. And we're currently set to the, forget which mode we were set at. We're currently set to the hard light mode, and since I reset my my layout, it closed the button from the track header. So let me reopen that. There it is. Okay, so we're currently set to hard light, and you can see the strange combination of those two clips. And as we move through this, you see the different combinations based on the modes that I'm choosing. Oops, I chose it from the wrong one. Sorry, let's set that back to source alpha, and here's the top track with dodge and lighten. So just different ways of combining the videos. Okay, let's go back to our text example. Now, here we have the background showing through from the transparency on the top track, and I'm going to set this back to source alpha. Now, one effect that people often like to make is they want to fill the text with a piece of video. So how do you do that? Well, let's just work with the text just a little bit, just to make it a little bit easier to see. I'll just say it's big truck, and we'll make it impact, which is a fatter font, and I'll make it bold just to make it nice and big, and then I'll make the text bigger. Now let's say we want, instead of what we see here with the background, the video, we want the video to be showing in the text. Well, it's very easy to do that with the text tool itself, just by changing the text to transparent and changing the background to opaque. Okay, so there you have your text filling the words. And that's a nice effect. But what would be cooler is if we could have something underneath that shows, while we're showing the video inside the text, something showing underneath. How do we accomplish that? Well, we can use compositing to help us do that. I'm going to set this back to transparent, to a white text with a black background, because as we learned with the checkerboard, black and white is kind of a key to our transparent work that we want to do. So let's say we wanted another one of these noise textures. I'm just going to take something, it's not going to be pretty, but it's going to be noticeable. So I'll just take that and put it in the bottom track so that you can see the results of what I'm about to do here. Right now you don't see anything but the text because it's black and white, it has no transparency. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to go up to my video effects and I'm going to choose a mask generator. Now a mask generator is similar to the multiply mask compositing mode, not the same but similar in that it will knock out my black for me. So if I drop this on to my event, it knocks out the black and now I have the white text. Okay, big deal. That's what I had before I changed the opacity of the text and so forth. Okay, but that's an important step for what we're about to do here. The next thing I want to do is to change my compositing mode for that top track to multiply mask. Now, even though you don't see it here because it's transparent, it's set to, it's been knocked out by the mask generator, there's still black value back there. So when I change this to multiply mask, it's going to, remember the checkerboard that we saw earlier, it showed what was under the white and it knocks out what's under the black. So, or it turns what's under the black, turns black. So let's change this to multiply mask and see, yep, that's exactly it. I've got my truck in the background and I've got a black background. So how do we get through to the third layer on the bottom here? And that's where a little bit more compositing magic that Vegas Pro has comes into play. And that is the ability to make one track a compositing child of another track. What does that mean? Well, right now, all of these tracks are at the same level. And the first track composites with the second track. And the result of that composites with the third track. Well, the result of the first and second track is black and some colors, so there's no transparency to show you what's on the bottom track. So what I can do with a composite child track, there are many things I can do by making a track a composite child. But one of the things that I can do is to treat the first two tracks as a compositing unit and then composite that unit with the next track down. And when I do that, when I make that second track sort of a compositing unit along with the first track, it no longer shows as black here, it shows as transparent, and almost as if by magic, almost as if I knew what I was doing, you can see through to the bottom track. So now you have three tracks compositing over the top of each other. The first two tracks are compositing according to this compositing mode setting. The first and second track are a compositing group that's compositing with the bottom track with this parent composite mode setting. So it starts getting a little complex, but you can see the power of it as we start building this out. Now, what if I wanted to have a shadow underneath this this text to make it stand out from that background a little bit? And again, that background could be anything. It could be another piece of video. In fact, I can just drag another piece of video in there real quickly to show you that that's the case. But for now, you can see the truck here and the video in the back. It can be anything, but I'm just using this generated media just to make it a little bit more obvious. But if I want to put a shadow, a drop shadow behind this text, well, I could come up to my text track and say, okay, let's go to my shadow settings. I can close this and turn shadow on. But look what's going to happen. You might be able to predict what's going to happen. The shadow is black. So if I turn it on, what happens? You don't see anything happen because we are knocking out the black with the compositing mode, remember? So we need another solution. The normal shadow for text won't work. And that's where a little tool called the Layer Dimensionality plugin comes in handy. And you may have seen this plugin and wondered what it was for and why you would use it. Well, here's a good example of why you might use it. I'm going to drop the Layer Dimensionality plugin on the text track and choose a shadow. And now you see a shadow because it's applying, it's not being affected by the mask generator that's knocking out the black. It's after that in the change, so now you can see it. So we can go through and choose something cool like maybe a strong emboss effect or something like that. And if I pull the preview window off and make it bigger, you can see the result of what I've been doing here. Hold on, let's make that bigger. And so there's a nice truck driving through our big truck text with a background and an embossed shadow on the bottom. So, cool. There's a lot more that you can do with the parent-child relationship here, but that's one of the cool things that you can do with it. So, I've only got 4 minutes left, and I had hoped to get through a lot more because there's a lot more to show you. So let me just show you maybe one more thing here, and I think what we're going to have to do is a part 2 for this training, maybe next month or something, to go into some of the other things that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about 3D plane compositing. I wanted to talk a little bit more about parent-child relationships and some of the things that you can do with those. So I think maybe rather than to try to squeeze that all into 3.5 minutes, let's save that for a part 2, maybe next month. Okay, but one last thing to show you before I leave here is that each track has a level slider, and that level slider controls the compositing level. So I can bring that whole compositing piece in and out and show just the big truck video, and the rest of it goes away. You can also right-click the track and choose Insert Remove Envelopes, Composite Level, and this gives you a composite level envelope that you can adjust however you'd like to. So I'm going to start it out at 0. I'll put a keyframe here and a keyframe here and bring it up. And so now what you'll see is the video will start in, and then eventually it will be overlaid by the background and the text. So you can use that compositing envelope to come in and out, strengthen, weaken your compositing, and so forth. And just like any other envelope, you can add as many points to it as you want and create all kinds of different fade-in and fade-out effects from your compositing. So in the last couple of minutes, let's just experiment a little bit and see what different compositing modes does to this little piece of artwork that I've got going here based on the behavior of those different things. So what does add do to it? Kind of removes the effect entirely and just puts the text over the top. Subtract gives us black text. And I don't know what it's going to do. I'm just trying to do some different things and see what we get. And that's part of what you're going to have to do with compositing modes, is to just go through and choose them and see what you can come up with and what it makes things look like. Here's kind of an interesting one with the overlay. Hard light just gives us black and white text. I also didn't mention that every track has a compositing mode. So you can get very sophisticated with how deep you go with compositing in your projects. But the best thing for you to do is to just start using compositing, just start experimenting with some of the different composite options that you have and see what you can come up with and see what interesting looks you can come up with. That was darken, oops, let's do the right track, lighten. And you notice that some of them result in the same look as some of the other ones. And you just have to test them to find out what you get. Here's kind of an interesting look that I got with the difference in different squared composite modes. Give you some crazy stuff here. So you can use composite modes to get really creative and have a lot of fun just experimenting. I see that Bree has sent me a message asking why this week's topic was not about color grading. I think somewhere along the line, I got confused about what we were showing on which week, and color grading will be next week's training. So sorry about that confusion, but we will look at the color grading tools in next week's training. Okay, that brings us up to the half hour. Like I said, I think we'll do a part 2 of this because I didn't get nearly as far as I wanted to get through it. But hopefully I gave you an explanation of how compositing works and some of the things that you might be able to do with it, and this trick of filling your text with a piece of moving video while you've got something else going on in the background. That's a cool trick. Okay, that's it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so that you get notified anytime we go live again. And if you would, give this video a like. That helps us spread the word that we're doing these kinds of things. And hopefully that helps us bring you more good training in the future. So I appreciate everybody being here. Once again, every time I do this, I get farther and farther away from that chat because I just can't possibly keep up with it. But hopefully Bree's been answering some of your questions, and I'll take a look at all of that when I'm done here. But thanks for joining us today, and hope that you learned a little bit of something and that you enjoyed the training, and hope you tune in next week when we will talk about color grading and the color grading panel. I'm going to leave this run for about 10-15 seconds while everything buffers through, but other than that, the training is done, and I will see you next week. Thanks.